Hello, friends. It's Kimberly here with Mother Me Beautiful. A quick coaching corner today on maybe coping with a new diagnosis. And it doesn't really matter what the diagnosis is, but sometimes when we hear a diagnosis like diabetes or chronic kidney disease or fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, sometimes when we hear a diagnosis or when we're given a new diagnosis, it can be pretty scary. And sometimes the tendency is to kind of give up, almost like, I'm kind of screwed now that I have this diagnosis, and I'm at its mercy. Or specifically, you see that with people when they're diagnosed with cancer. That's a different topic altogether. But let's talk about a chronic diagnosis, one that you may be looking forward to or anticipating being a part of your life for the rest of your life. It can be very scary. First of all, I think it's important to differentiate a diagnosis from the person. If you've been given a diagnosis like diabetes or heart disease or chronic kidney disease, you have to know, first and foremost, that you are not that disease. You are still who you are. The diagnosis or the disease process or whatever it is simply something that's happening to you. And after that initial shock, I think it's impossible to expect people to hear a diagnosis and not go through some kind of a shock. And what do I do now? Most people didn't go to medical school or nursing school, and so they don't really have an understanding of what that diagnosis means. And that's where really working with your healthcare team is really important, to learn all you can about that, and then focus on the factors that you have personal control over. You see, when we focus on factors that are outside of our control, like genetics, or maybe even where we live, if you don't have the opportunity or the wherewithal to move, or something in your family's history, those things you don't have control over. So when we worry about those things, it's a lot like spitting in the wind. It just comes right back on your face, doesn't do you any good. Keeps you up at night, puts a hole in your stomach from worry. You just lose a lot of personal power when you focus on things that you don't have control over. Instead, if we focus on the things that we have personal power over, you magnify your ability to make a change, to improve. And that's really what I want to focus on today. And, as you work with a healthcare team, sometimes we don't even know what questions to ask. That's where it's really important to work with like a nurse coach, or typically most doctors just don't have time to teach in a manner that's really impactful or meaningful to most patients. Now, I'm not saying all doctors, but for most doctors, their day is so crammed, they just don't have the time to do that. But they do have office staff who do, nurses, nurse practitioners or PAs, somebody that has a little bit more time to teach. If you have nurse coaching available to you through your employer or through your health plan, that's a really great benefit. I work with a company called Renal Logic, and we have a group of nurse coaches who are very skilled and have a lot of experience in teaching. And that's what we do. We focus on helping people harness their personal power. So it's important to find out all you can about what caused the disease in the first place. For instance, if you understood type 2 diabetes, then and how that happened, that helps you figure out what kinds of things you need to change. What do you need to track? What questions might you even have that you don't even know you have yet? So knowledge helps you generate more questions. Haven't you found that to be true? I know in my life, it seems like the more I learn, the more I realize I don't have a clue, the more questions that I have. So let that be a burning desire for you, and then figure out what are those factors I have control over. And typically, for most disease processes, it comes down to pretty much the same things: diet, exercise, Self-care measures like getting enough sleep. Sleep is really important, and we often don't talk about the role of sleep. But when you sleep, particularly REM sleep, your pituitary kicks out this wonderful hormone called growth hormone. Have you ever noticed when you have little babies and you put them to sleep and you get up in the morning and you think, oh my gosh, you changed overnight? That's because of growth hormone. Now, as adults, we're not necessarily growing this way. Hopefully we're not growing this way, right? But we're not growing taller, but we are still laying down new tissue. We are still repairing and regenerating tissues and cells. And so getting enough sleep is really important. And most people stress. Matter of fact, stress. Let's talk about stress for a minute. Stress is huge. Stress has a role to play in autoimmune disorders and obesity, in your body's ability to heal, even disease pathogenesis, or when a disease actually starts. Stress plays a huge role just because of all the chemicals that are pumped out into our bloodstream and our bodies when we're stressed. Hormones that typically help us in times of stress, unless they're not managed well. I think we've talked about that before. We compared it to our late great Uncle Caveman Joe. When he was stressed because he was getting chased by a dinosaur, his adrenal glands kicked out all this stress hormones and cortisol that gave him energy to fight or to flee. It took energy away from non-vital body systems and organs so that he could have a fight for his life. The difference today is that we're not running for our lives. We're not fighting off dinosaurs. We're stuck in a chair or in an office, and those hormones just kind of circulate. They don't get a chance to get expended. And most of us aren't exercising the way we should be, and we're not giving an outlet for those. So stress is a huge player. It's hard, almost impossible, for people to lose weight when they're stressed. It certainly behooves us, all of us, to learn how to manage our stress wisely and in a healthy manner, because we aren't just going to have stress. That's just life. But it's important to deal with that. So those are typically those factors that almost in every disease process you have personal control over. Managing what goes on in your mind is another one. You know, depression is pretty common in people that have some kind of a diagnosis, a chronic disease. You know, we tend to get lost in that. We tend to think that we are that disease process. You know, and when we're depressed, there's a whole nother cascade of hormones that's released. Depression isn't just in your head, it's in your body. And your body will experience a depression as well. And that kind of robs us of the energy that we need to take care of ourselves. If you are feeling depressed, if you have an overwhelming sense of gloom or sadness that's not transient, it's important for you to figure out what you can do about that. And if you need help, it's important for you to get that help. Sometimes people need a little bit of medication and some counseling. That doesn't mean that you're a failure. It means that you're a smart person who knows when you need help, and you can reach out and get that help and take care of yourself. If you have questions about a specific disease process, I'm happy to answer general questions. But you know, your doctor, your healthcare providers is your person of choice to connect with, and really make sure that you're developing a partnership with your doctor. It's important that sometimes we hire a doctor. In my opinion, I hire my doctor and I fire him when he no longer serves me. But it's important for me to develop a good relationship with my doctor so that I can get my questions answered, right? When we go in and we see our doctor and we don't have a list of questions, it kind of robs us of that opportunity. His time is limited, as is ours. But it's really important to do what we can to maximize that visit. Thanks so much for watching, and I wish you all the best.